My girlfriend always thought we'd stay together because she's beautiful and never respected me, so I left while she was partying and she was completely shocked. Sup Reddit, my name is Dylan, and I'm 29 years old. This is the story of the night I drove away from my marriage and never looked back. The wind punched against the side mirror as I drove through the empty streets. One hand was locked around the steering wheel like it owed me something. I didn't even realize how hard I was gripping it until my fingers went completely numb. It was well past 1 a.m., but I didn't feel tired at all. Instead, I felt completely wired, but not the kind of energy you get from energy drinks or an adrenaline rush. This energy was different. It was colder, sharper. This was the kind of clarity that comes when something finally breaks inside you, and you stop pretending it can ever be fixed again. The kind of moment where everything suddenly makes perfect sense, even though your world is falling apart. Victoria had been gone for 5 days on one of her girls' trips. That's all I needed. Just 5 days to disappear completely. 5 days to make absolutely sure I would never have to walk through that door again. Never have to pretend I didn't know what I knew. Never have to smile and nod while she fed me another carefully constructed lie. The last thing Victoria said to me before she left was, "Don't wait up." She tossed her perfectly styled hair and added, "We'll be wine-drunk and barefoot on the beach all weekend." She said it like it was some kind of joke, like she was performing in a movie where she played the carefree wife going on an innocent vacation with her girlfriends. I didn't laugh at her little performance. I just kissed her cheek like I always did, playing my part as the devoted husband. She even laughed at that, probably thinking about how pathetic I was for still showing her affection when she was about to spend the weekend with another man. I started packing exactly 3 hours after she left for the airport. There was no dramatic music playing in the background, no tears streaming down my face. Just the soft, mechanical scrape of drawers sliding open and closing as I methodically went through our shared life. I didn't even need to look inside some of the drawers because I already knew exactly what was mine and what belonged to her. I knew what I was taking with me, and more importantly, I knew what I was leaving behind forever. Her stuff would stay exactly where it was. Her expensive scented candles that filled the house with artificial lavender. Her collection of overpriced skin serums that promised to turn back time. That stupid little coffee mug she bought during one of her shopping sprees. The one that says, "Wife Life" in gold foil lettering. I left it all exactly where she'd placed it, like a museum of a marriage that had died months ago. I didn't even touch our wedding album. I wasn't angry anymore. I'd already burned through anger weeks ago. You don't really get to this stage of cold determination overnight. It's like dying by frostbite, where you get numb first and you mistake that numbness for calm. But underneath that false calm, you're slowly breaking apart, piece by piece, until there's nothing left to save. Victoria wasn't always like this. When we first met, she was all sunlight and sharp wit, the kind of woman who could light up any room she walked into. She used to sit on our kitchen counter eating oranges straight from the peel, mocking romantic comedies while I cooked dinner for us. We would talk for hours about nothing and everything, those meandering conversations that somehow felt more important than anything else in the world. But somewhere along the line, something fundamental shifted. She stopped seeing me as someone she had actively chosen to be with and started treating me like something she had simply settled for. The change was so subtle at first that I didn't even notice it happening. It was like watching someone slowly fade away, except they were still physically there, going through all the same motions. The compliments that used to come naturally just dried up completely. Our conversations became purely transactional, discussions about bills, schedules, and household maintenance, nothing more. She started rolling her eyes more often and laughing far less, especially when I was the one trying to make her smile. Every interaction felt like I was bothering her, like my presence in her life had become an inconvenience she had to endure. And then the girls' nights began in earnest. It started innocently enough with one evening out every few weeks with her friend Chloe. Then it became twice a month. Before I knew it, "I need some space" had evolved into "Don't wait up," which became her standard phrase whenever she wanted to disappear for the night. Then came the business trips that seemed to multiply exponentially, the late nights at the office that became routine, and the work retreats that always seemed to pop up at the last minute. But it was her phone that eventually told the real story, the one she thought I'd never piece together. About 8 months ago, Victoria dropped her iPhone on the bathroom tile floor. I picked it up before she could reach it, just trying to be helpful, but when I lifted it, the screen lit up automatically. Several notifications were visible from an unknown contact, just the initials BM. One preview message read, "Still thinking about last weekend." And another said, "You left your sweater in my car." I handed her the phone without saying anything at first, but she couldn't meet my eyes. The silence stretched between us like a chasm until I finally asked, "You going to explain that?" She stared at me for just a beat too long. Long enough for me to know that whatever came out of her mouth next would be a lie. Then she shrugged with that practiced casual indifference she'd perfected. "Oh my God, Dylan, it's just Brandon from the marketing team," she said with an exaggerated sigh. "We got coffee after a conference last week. You're being completely paranoid." The way she said it with that slight edge of annoyance was designed to make me feel guilty for even asking. Like I was the problem for being suspicious. I wasn't being paranoid, but I didn't push the issue. That's the kind of thing you do when you love someone who lies to your face. You give them the benefit of the doubt, even when doubt is all you have left. You tell yourself that maybe you're overthinking things. Maybe you're seeing problems that aren't really there. You want so desperately to believe them that you ignore every instinct screaming at you to pay attention. The lies didn't even get creative after that initial confrontation. They just became thinner and lazier, like she wasn't even trying to keep her story straight anymore. It was almost insulting how little effort she put into deceiving me. And every single time I questioned her about inconsistencies or asked for clarification, she would flip the entire situation around and make me the villain. "Why are you so insecure?" she would ask, shaking her head like I was being unreasonable. "You need to stop being so controlling. I can't breathe in this marriage." She had this way of turning every legitimate concern I raised into evidence of my own character flaws. According to Victoria, I wasn't a husband who had noticed his wife was lying. I was an insecure, controlling man who was suffocating her with my suspicions. So eventually, I just stopped talking about it. I stopped asking questions, stopped pointing out inconsistencies, stopped trying to get straight answers from someone who had clearly forgotten how to give them. I let her believe that I had bought into all her stories completely. I played along with her charade, letting her think I was blind and stupid and completely dependent on her affection, like a dog waiting patiently for scraps from her table. I cooked pasta dinners that she barely touched. I paid all the bills without complaint. I smiled politely for her friends when they came over, playing the role of the devoted husband while she sat there knowing exactly what she was doing to me behind closed doors. And through it all, I watched her drift further and further away, transforming into a version of herself that I didn't even recognize anymore. Then came the hotel receipt that changed everything. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and Victoria had told me she was staying late at the office for a mandatory team building event. She'd made it sound like such a burden, complaining about how these corporate activities were cutting into her evening. I was just cleaning out our junk drawer, one of those mindless household tasks you do when you're trying to keep busy, when I found a folded piece of paper tucked deep inside one of her old purses. When I unfolded it, my blood went cold. It was a hotel receipt dated from 3 weeks earlier. A room had been booked under her name at a downtown hotel, 1 king bed, 1 guest. The timestamp showed she'd checked in on a Tuesday evening, the same night she claimed she had been working late on a presentation that was supposedly due the next morning. I called the hotel, pretending to be following up about a lost item from that date. The receptionist was helpful and confirmed that yes, Victoria had indeed checked in that evening and stayed the night. She'd never even bothered to lie well. The dates, the timeline, everything could be easily verified with a simple phone call. But I didn't confront her about it. Not yet. That's not how I operate, and by this point I had learned that direct confrontation with Victoria only led to more elaborate lies and accusations about my supposed paranoia. Instead, I decided to wait and watch. I started building what I privately called my quiet little exit plan while she was busy planning her next girls' trip. Las Vegas, of course. Sun, beaches, margaritas, and sisterhood. At least that's how she sold it to me. She hugged me at the airport like she was heading off to war, and I was her devoted soldier sending her off to battle. The embrace felt hollow, performative, like she was going through the motions of being a loving wife for the benefit of anyone who might be watching. The second she cleared TSA security and disappeared from view, I called the moving company. I had already researched local movers and specifically requested that they come late in the evening, after dark. I didn't want neighbors seeing what was happening, not because I was ashamed, but because I wanted Victoria to come home to silence and emptiness without any advance warning from well-meaning friends who might have witnessed the move. 2 guys showed up with 1 truck, just as I'd requested. We spent 4 hours quietly and efficiently moving my belongings out of the house we'd shared for the past 3 years. I didn't take everything that was technically mine. I wasn't interested in fighting over possessions or making some grand statement. I just took what mattered to me, what I actually needed to start over somewhere else. When everything was loaded and gone, I left my keys on the kitchen counter where she'd definitely see them. No note, no explanation, no warning about what she was about to discover. Just an echo of everything I no longer owed her. Everything I was no longer willing to give to someone who had stopped valuing it months ago. I wanted her to come home from her weekend of lies and figure it out for herself. Let her sit in that empty house and feel what silence actually tastes like. Let her experience firsthand the mess she had created, alone, without me there to absorb her anger or listen to her justifications. I didn't sleep that first night. Not really. I lay on the mattress in my new rental apartment. No sheets, no headboard. Just the basic frame and me staring up at the popcorn ceiling, like it might have answers written somewhere in its textured surface. The room was completely silent except for the occasional groan of old plumbing in the walls and the steady ticking of a wall clock that I hadn't even noticed until around 4 a.m. It felt like time itself was mocking me. Tick, 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 counting down to the exact moment when Victoria would unlock our front door and realize that I was gone. I found myself imagining her reaction in vivid detail. Would it be confusion first? Then outrage? Maybe she'd call me immediately, or perhaps she'd show up at this new place once she figured out where I'd gone, banging on the door and demanding explanations. Or maybe she wouldn't care at all. Maybe she'd actually laugh about it with Chloe, saying something like, "Guess he finally grew a pair," before calling Brandon to celebrate her newfound freedom. There was this one specific moment I kept replaying in my mind during those long, sleepless hours. Something that had happened about 4 months earlier that I couldn't stop thinking about. I had actually made dinner that night. Really tried for once. I'd picked up fresh salmon from the market, roasted vegetables with herbs, and even set candles on the dining room table. I thought maybe if I put in some real effort, we could have one of those evenings we used to have when we first got married. Just talking, connecting, remembering why we fell in love in the first place. When Victoria came home, she took one look at the carefully prepared meal and let out this long, exaggerated groan, like I had personally ruined her entire evening. "Dylan, I already told you I'm not doing heavy food this week," she said, with that particular tone of annoyance she'd perfected. God, do you even listen to me anymore? I remember standing there holding the serving spoon like a complete idiot, wondering if I'd somehow imagined the 7 years we'd spent together. Because the woman in front of me, rolling her eyes and texting someone while I tried to explain that I just wanted to do something nice, wasn't my wife. She wasn't even close to the person I'd married. That woman had vanished somewhere along the way, replaced by this cold stranger who seemed personally offended by any effort I made to connect with her. But you don't just fall out of love all at once. It bleeds out of you slowly, in moments exactly like that one. In the dismissive sighs and the smirks that said she thought I was pathetic for even trying. In the passive-aggressive silence that followed every single attempt I made to bridge the growing distance between us. You sit there hoping it's just a phase, that the stress from work or life or whatever is making her act this way temporarily. You tell yourself that the woman who once lit up every room she walked into is still somewhere inside this cold stranger sitting across from you at the dinner table. But eventually, hope becomes too exhausting to maintain, and you realize you've been trying to love a ghost. It wasn't just the lies about Brandon and the hotel receipts. Those were just the final confirmation of what I'd already known deep down. The real damage was in the daily disrespect, the complete disinterest she showed in anything I had to say or feel. Victoria didn't even pretend to value me as a person anymore. I had become her personal doormat with a mortgage, her backup plan, the reliable guy who paid for the gym membership she was using to stay in shape for someone else. Yeah, I said his name. Brandon. By this point, I knew exactly who he was. Brandon Marshall works in her office building, drives a silver BMW, tall with a carefully groomed beard, flashy white teeth, and an obvious spray tan. He's the kind of guy who calls other men bro unironically and compliments himself out loud. Probably the type who takes mirror selfies at the gym and posts motivational quotes about success on social media. I had actually seen them together once, completely by accident. I was coming out of the FedEx store downtown, and there they were across the street, laughing like teenagers who'd just ditched school. As I watched, Victoria reached up and brushed something off his shoulder. An intimate, familiar gesture that told me everything I needed to know about how long this had been going on. Then he kissed her cheek, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like he belonged there in the space that used to be mine. She didn't see me standing there, or maybe she did and simply didn't care anymore. But here's the thing that surprised me most about that moment. It didn't rip me apart the way I thought it would. Instead of feeling devastated or betrayed, all I felt was a strange sense of clarity washing over me. She wasn't mine anymore. She hadn't been mine for a very long time. I was just the guy holding space, keeping her life stable and comfortable while she rehearsed her exit strategy with someone else. And yet somehow, I still felt like I was the one who was disappearing. Like I was the one who had become invisible, irrelevant, easily replaceable. It's a special kind of pain when you realize that the person you love most in the world sees you as nothing more than a placeholder. I spent the next 2 days doing something I'd been too afraid to do for years, telling the truth about my marriage to the people who mattered most to me. I called my parents first, then my sister Morgan, and finally my closest friend Tyler, who had always been suspicious of Victoria but had kept his mouth shut out of respect for me. They all reacted differently to the news, but there was one common thread that ran through every single conversation. Finally, Tyler actually laughed out loud when I told him I had moved out while Victoria was in Las Vegas. "Man, you should have left her 2 anniversaries ago," he said without hesitation. "She's been treating you like a stranger with a debit card for months. I was wondering when you'd finally wake up and see it." That comment hit me harder than I expected because it was absolutely true. Tyler had been watching from the outside, seeing what I'd been too close to recognize. Victoria had reduced me to nothing more than a reliable source of financial stability, a convenient roommate who paid the bills and asked very few questions about where she spent her evenings. While I was having these long overdue conversations with people who actually cared about me, I received exactly 3 messages from Victoria during her entire Las Vegas trip. They were casual, meaningless little updates that felt like afterthoughts. One was a picture of the Strip at night, all neon lights and tourist chaos. Another was a boomerang video of a martini glass, the kind of content she posted to make her life look glamorous and carefree. The third was a simple text that said "miss you," followed by a kiss emoji. That last message was the moment I knew with absolute certainty that she hadn't felt a damn thing when she kissed me goodbye at the airport. It was all performance, all carefully constructed theater designed to maintain the illusion that she was still a loving wife going on an innocent girls' trip. The casual tone, the generic sentiment, the emoji that felt like it was copied and pasted from a template. None of it carried any real emotion or genuine affection, so I didn't respond to any of them. I just waited. I waited for her to come home from her weekend of lies and discover what I'd done. I waited for the storm that I knew was coming. The inevitable explosion when she realized that her comfortable, predictable life had just been turned completely upside down. Tuesday evening arrived, and at exactly 7:23 p.m., my phone finally rang. Victoria's name lit up the screen like a ghost calling from another world, and for a split second, I felt my heart rate spike. But instead of answering, I simply turned off the ringer, set the phone down on my kitchen counter, and went back to eating dinner alone. Peacefully. She was home, and I was gone. The reality of what I'd done was probably just beginning to sink in for her. Victoria called 19 times that evening. I didn't answer once. By the 11th call, she had started leaving voicemails, probably thinking that maybe I just wasn't hearing my phone or was too busy to pick up. I didn't listen to the first 6 messages. I could see them accumulating on my screen, but I wasn't ready to hear her voice yet. The 7th voicemail played automatically when I accidentally tapped the screen while trying to silence another incoming call. I heard maybe 4 seconds of it before I ended the playback. Just her voice, frantic and sharp, like a blade cutting through the silence. "Dylan, what the hell is going on? Where's all your stuff? I don't understand what—" I cut it off right there. It wasn't even the confusion in her voice that bothered me. It was the tone. She sounded angry, indignant, like I had done something wrong to her. Like she was the one who had come home to betrayal, the innocent victim of some incomprehensible cruelty. That voicemail was nothing but panic dressed up in entitlement. It was the sound of someone who had never once considered that her actions might have consequences. Someone who genuinely believed that I would just sit there forever, absorbing whatever treatment she decided to dish out, grateful for whatever scraps of attention she threw my way. I spent that entire night sitting on the floor of my new apartment with my laptop open, scrolling through old pictures that I didn't even realize I still had backed up to the cloud. Photos from trips we'd taken together, birthdays we'd celebrated, and yes, even our wedding day. There she was, smiling at me from under the veil she'd picked out with her mother, who had hugged me with tears in her eyes after the ceremony and whispered, "She's so lucky to have you." Was she lucky, or was I just easy to take advantage of? Looking at those photos now, I couldn't help but wonder when exactly she'd stopped seeing me as a partner and started viewing me as a convenience. By morning, Victoria's tone in her messages had shifted dramatically, and I could track her emotional journey through the progression of her texts. It was like watching someone cycle through the stages of grief, except she was grieving the loss of control rather than the loss of love. Text 1. Where are you? This isn't funny. Text 5. Seriously, Dylan, talk to me. Text 11. Did someone break in? What happened to all your stuff? She was still trying to find an explanation that didn't involve her own actions, still hoping there was some external force that could explain why her comfortable life had suddenly been disrupted. But then came the real Victoria, the one who had been hiding behind fake tears and Instagram filters for months. The one I'd been waking up next to every morning without even realizing how much I'd grown to dislike her. Text 16. So you're just going to disappear like a coward? Text 17. Grow the hell up. You want attention? Fine, you got it. There she was, the entitled, manipulative woman who had been slowly destroying our marriage one lie at a time. No more pretending to be confused or concerned, just pure, undiluted anger at the audacity I'd shown by refusing to play along with her game anymore. And then came message 18, the one that told me everything I needed to know. This is about Brandon, isn't it? I stared at that message for a very long time. She didn't say, who's Brandon? She didn't ask, what are you talking about? She didn't even attempt to feign ignorance. She just knew. The name came to her immediately, which meant she'd been expecting this conversation for a while. She'd been mentally preparing for the moment when I'd finally put the pieces together. There was no more lying left to be done. She'd already calculated that the deception had run its course, and now she was just trying to figure out how to manage the fallout. Maybe she thought I'd scream at her, accuse her dramatically, maybe even cry and beg her to choose me over him. But what she didn't expect was the worst punishment of all complete and total silence. That day, she decided to escalate things by showing up at my office. I saw her before she saw me, pacing outside the glass doors in that expensive designer coat I'd bought her last Christmas. She looked genuinely rattled, which was something new. Victoria was always composed, always perfectly put together, always in complete control of how she presented herself to the world. But now she was chewing at her thumbnail like a nervous teenager who'd been caught sneaking out past curfew. Her hair wasn't perfectly styled, her makeup looked like it had been applied hastily, and she kept checking her phone like she was expecting some kind of backup or support that wasn't coming. I stepped outside before building security had the chance to call me, wanting to handle this on my own terms rather than letting her create a scene in my workplace. The moment we locked eyes, I could see she'd been rehearsing this confrontation. "Dylan," she said, rushing toward me like she'd been waiting for hours. "What is this? What are you doing?" I held up my hand, keeping my voice calm and controlled. "You need to leave." Her lips parted slightly like I'd physically slapped her. "Excuse me? You don't just vanish, Dylan. You don't just ghost your wife." The word wife hit my ears like a cruel joke. It was a title she'd thrown in the emotional trash months ago, only digging it out now when it suited her argument and made her sound like the wronged party in this situation. "You want to talk?" I said, keeping my voice steady and cold. "Then let's talk. Let's talk about BM. Let's talk about hotel rooms and cloud folders. Let's talk about the version of you I didn't see until you let your mask slip for 1 second." She looked around nervously, suddenly aware that people were watching us through the office windows. She hated that more than anything. Victoria thrived in controlled environments where she could manage every detail of how she appeared to others. Quiet, curated spaces where she could be polite and charming without any risk of public drama or messy confrontations. "Dylan!" she hissed, lowering her voice to barely above a whisper. "You're blowing this way out of—" "No," I interrupted, not letting her finish whatever deflection she was about to offer. "I'm not blowing anything out of proportion. I'm cleaning up a mess that you made." She opened her mouth to respond, probably with another carefully rehearsed excuse or manipulation tactic, but I'd already turned around and started walking back toward the building. I left her standing there with one hand raised, some half-formed apology or excuse caught in her throat, looking like someone who'd just realized that the script she'd been following was no longer working. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. Back in my office, I shut the door and took what felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. Let her rage in the parking lot. Let her twist the story however she wanted to tell it to her friends. Let her paint me as unhinged or claim that I'd cracked under pressure. The truth was beautifully simple. I wasn't hers anymore. She just hadn't realized yet that she'd lost me long before I ever physically left. 2 days passed in relative peace before she decided to show up again. This time at my sister Morgan's house. I should have seen it coming. Victoria had always hated Morgan, thought she was too blunt and too involved in my personal business. In reality, Morgan had just never bought into Victoria's carefully constructed act. She'd seen through the sugar-sweet smiles and passive-aggressive comments from the very beginning of our relationship. When I'd called Morgan to tell her I'd left Victoria, she didn't say, "I'm sorry for your loss," or offer condolences about my failed marriage. She just said, "Took you long enough," like she'd been waiting years for me to finally wake up and see what everyone else could see. So when Victoria showed up at Morgan's front door with her hair perfectly done and her makeup flawless, putting on that soft, wounded voice she used when she wanted to appear vulnerable, Morgan didn't even let her get through the first fake, sad syllable before shutting her down completely. I got the full play-by-play from Morgan later that evening, and honestly, it was exactly what I'd expected would happen. "She asked if you were staying here," Morgan told me over the phone, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Tried to pull the "I'm still his wife" card, like that title meant something coming from her. So I asked her if that title expires when you treat someone like garbage for a year and a half. I didn't laugh, even though part of me wanted to. I wanted to find it funny, but deep down, it still stung. Not because Victoria had shown up looking for me. That was predictable. What hurt was that she was still trying to control the narrative, still acting like this was just some dramatic overreaction I'd eventually get over once I calmed down and came to my senses. What Victoria couldn't seem to wrap her head around was the fundamental truth of the situation. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. There's a crucial difference between those two emotional states, and she was completely incapable of recognizing it. She messaged me again later that same night, and this time her approach was different. The tone was slower, more calculated, more surgical in its precision. She'd clearly taken time to think about her strategy and craft something that might actually get through to me. "I know you're hurting," the first message read. "I know I haven't been perfect, but you walking out like this isn't fair either." There was her favorite word again. Fair. Victoria had this way of treating every emotional situation like it was a business transaction, like betrayal and trust were items on a balance sheet that could be negotiated and adjusted until both parties felt they were getting an equitable deal. She treated emotional betrayal like it was a shared debt that we were both equally responsible for paying off. I didn't respond, so she tried again. "I'm not saying I didn't make mistakes," came the next message. "But if you just talk to me like an adult, we could work through this. It's not like I don't love you." That message almost got a reply from me. Almost. Because that word, love, coming from her mouth felt like such a perversion of what the word was supposed to mean. I remembered that Tuesday evening when she'd come home from one of her so-called yoga retreats, her hair still damp and her neck slightly red like she'd fallen asleep in the sun. But there hadn't been any tan lines, which was strange for someone who'd supposedly spent the weekend at a beach retreat. She'd walked into our house humming, actually humming, like she was in some kind of euphoric mood. She dropped her bag by the door, kissed me on the cheek like she was trying to convince herself she still felt something, and said, "Let's order Chinese food tonight." I'd asked her if she'd had fun at the retreat. She said yes, of course she had. Then I asked if she'd been with Chloe the whole time, and she paused for just a second, barely noticeable, but I caught it. "Yeah, of course," she said. But that tiny pause told me everything I needed to know. She couldn't even lie properly anymore. She just didn't care enough to put in the effort required to make her deceptions believable. When you love someone and they stop caring whether you believe them or not, that's when you know the grave has already been dug. You're just waiting for someone to start throwing dirt on the coffin. Later that week, she sent me an email. A long one, the kind of message someone writes when they're trying to make their version of events sound reasonable and well thought out. She peppered it with emotional buzzwords like confused and disconnected, saying she wasn't sure who we were anymore as a couple. She mentioned marriage counseling, suggested that maybe this separation was actually a good thing, that it might make us stronger in the long run. She was still operating under the delusion that I was on some kind of temporary break, like I was just taking time to cool off before inevitably coming back to work things out. She completely misunderstood what was happening. I wasn't on a break from our marriage. I was free from it. The silence must have started eating her alive. Because that Saturday night, I received a picture message that crossed every line of decency I thought she still possessed. It popped up on my phone while I was sitting in my kitchen, eating pizza and drinking a beer in perfect, peaceful solitude. The photo was a selfie of Victoria, completely naked, no makeup, lying alone on what used to be our bed. The caption read, "Is this really what you want?" I looked at that image. The same face that used to make me feel like I was home. The same body I'd once found beautiful and comforting. But now all I could see was the face of someone who had looked me in the eye and lied repeatedly, who had laughed with another man behind my back while simultaneously accusing me of being distant and emotionally unavailable. I deleted the picture immediately. No reply, no acknowledgement, no pity. That bed was hers now, along with all the loneliness and regret that came with it. Let her lie there and stare at the ceiling, feeling the full weight of what she had lost. Not because I had left, but because she had let go of me emotionally long before I ever walked out that door. It was the knock on my apartment door that finally pushed things into an entirely new gear. Sunday evening had been quiet and peaceful. I was halfway through folding laundry, one of those normal, mundane tasks that felt strangely therapeutic in a place that didn't smell like her expensive shampoo or echo with the sound of her voice anymore. The knock came soft at first, almost hesitant, like maybe the person on the other side wasn't even sure they wanted to be heard. But I knew who it was before I even stood up from the couch. Victoria. I took a deep breath before opening the door, not because I was nervous or afraid, but because I wanted to be completely calm when I faced her. I wanted to look at her and feel absolutely nothing. That had become my goal. Not revenge, not a dramatic shouting match, just clean, sharp indifference. She stood there wearing leggings and a hoodie, the kind of fake casual outfit you put on when you want to appear vulnerable and approachable. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and she wasn't wearing makeup, though I could see smudged eyeliner around her eyes like she'd been crying earlier or wanted it to look like she had. "Hey," she said softly. I didn't answer. I just stared at her, waiting. She tucked her hands into her sleeves, making herself look smaller and more fragile. I didn't know where else to go. I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my voice completely neutral. "You have a boyfriend, don't you?" That comment landed hard. Her lips parted in surprise, and I could see her scrambling for a response. "Dylan, isn't Brandon around?" I asked, pressing the advantage. "Or did he get tired of you too?" Her jaw clenched visibly, and she looked like she wanted to cry again, but wasn't sure if tears would be effective at this point. "I didn't come here to fight," she said finally. "Good," I replied without missing a beat. "Because I'm not fighting. I'm done." She took a step forward, like she thought she could just walk into my apartment, like the old rules still applied, and she could cross boundaries whenever it suited her. I blocked the doorway with my body, making it clear that those days were over. That stopped her cold. "I miss you," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I almost laughed. "You miss the version of me that tolerated you," I said calmly. "The guy who swallowed his pride and gave you all the space you wanted while you filled it with someone else. It wasn't like that." I did smile then, but there was no warmth in it. "Victoria, do you even know how many times you've lied to me? You've done it so often and so casually that I don't think you even remember what the truth looks like anymore." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For once in her life, she had no ready response, no practiced deflection. "You lied about business trips," I continued, my voice staying steady and controlled. "You lied about who you were with and where you were going. You lied to my face while texting him across the dinner table from me. And even now, you're standing here acting like you deserve something from me." That hit her where it hurt. I saw it in the slight twitch of her mouth, the way her confident facade cracked just a little bit more. But instead of backing down or acknowledging what I'd said, she switched tactics completely. "You think you're the only one who felt abandoned?" she said, her voice suddenly sharper and more aggressive. "You think I was happy in that marriage? You stopped trying, Dylan. You went cold. You buried yourself in work and never listened to me anymore." I laughed once, a dry, bitter sound. "There it is." "What the hell?" I said, my composure finally slipping just slightly. "The part where this becomes my fault. Where the cheating wife blames the husband for making her cheat. Classic Victoria." She took a step back like I'd physically slapped her across the face. "You want the truth?" I said, my voice still controlled, but with an edge of steel running through it. "Fine. I stopped listening because you stopped saying anything worth hearing. You talked at me, not to me. And every single time I tried to fix things between us, you looked at me like I was pathetic for even making the effort. I didn't mean it like that." "But you did mean it," I cut her off completely. "You meant every eye roll. You meant every night you turned your back to me in bed. You meant every lie you slipped between your teeth with that fake little smirk of yours. You thought I wouldn't find out about Brandon, and even if I did, you didn't think I'd have the spine to actually leave. She didn't speak. For the first time in our entire relationship, Victoria was completely speechless. I moved out without any warning, I continued, because I knew that if I gave you even the slightest chance to talk your way out of this, you'd twist everything around. You'd cry a little, maybe throw in a few carefully selected memories to manipulate me. You'd remind me of how things used to be between us, back when you still pretended to care, and I might have been weak enough to stay, and I would have hated myself for it for the rest of my life. Her eyes were getting glassy now, but I was completely beyond caring about her tears. Don't look at me like I broke something precious, I said firmly. You broke it. You dropped it on the ground and walked away from it months ago. I just finally stopped trying to hold the pieces together. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, and for just a second, I caught a glimpse of the woman I had originally married. The woman who used to dance barefoot in our kitchen while dinner was cooking, who kissed me slow and soft in the mornings before either of us had spoken a single word. But that version of Victoria had died a long time ago, replaced by this stranger who treated love like a negotiation and marriage like a business arrangement. Is this it? She asked, her voice barely audible. After everything we've been through together? Yeah, I said without hesitation. This is it. She turned around and walked away without another word. I didn't watch her go down the hallway. I didn't check the window to see if she looked back or hesitated by her car. I didn't hope she would change her mind and come back to try one more time. I simply closed the door, turned the deadbolt lock, and for the first time in years, I felt completely safe in my own silence. Monday morning came quietly, without the familiar buzz of Victoria's hairdryer from the bathroom or the passive-aggressive clatter she used to make in the kitchen while cleaning just loudly enough to signal her displeasure about something. There was just sunlight bleeding through the curtains of a room that didn't carry her scent anymore, didn't echo with her voice, didn't feel heavy with unspoken resentment. It should have felt empty and lonely. It didn't. It felt peaceful. I made coffee in complete silence and sat at the tiny two-person table that came with the rental apartment. For a long while, I just stared at the steam rising from my mug, enjoying the simple pleasure of a quiet morning that belonged entirely to me. My phone was on Do Not Disturb, but I could see the red notification bubble growing larger throughout the morning. She was still trying to reach me, still sending texts and making calls that I had no intention of answering. There was one voicemail that managed to catch my attention, not because I listened to it, but because of what I could see in the preview text. If you don't come back and talk to me like a man, I swear I'm going to show everyone who you really are. That message actually made me laugh out loud. Who I really are. Victoria had built this entire fantasy version of me in her head. A steady, quiet man who would rather bend than break, who would swallow every insult and cold shoulder and calculated lie because love was supposed to be unconditional. The man who kept giving and giving while she took and took, then twisted it all around to make herself the victim. She thought she had sculpted me into something docile and easily controlled, something that would always be there no matter how badly she treated it. What she didn't expect was that quiet people can be the most dangerous when they finally decide to stop absorbing damage and start stepping away from the fire. By noon, the group chat with our mutual friends had completely lit up. And that's when I knew Victoria had made her strategic move. She wasn't going to let me control the narrative of our separation. She was going to get ahead of it and spin the story in her favor before I had a chance to tell anyone what had really happened. I didn't even need to open the full conversation thread to understand what was happening. Just the first two images she'd posted in the group chat told me everything I needed to know about her approach. One was a close-up of our wedding photo, cropped to show her holding my face like she owned it, like I was her precious possession that had been stolen from her. The other was a fresh selfie of her crying real tears this time, with a caption that read, "I tried everything, but some people just break your heart no matter how hard you love them." The manipulation was masterful in its simplicity. She was positioning herself as the heartbroken wife who had done everything possible to save her marriage, while painting me as the cold, emotionally unavailable husband who had abandoned her without explanation. The reactions from our friends came fast and predictable. Chloe, of course, poured it on thick with her response. "OMG, Victoria, I'm so sorry. You deserve so much better than this." Jason, who always tried to stay neutral in any kind of drama, posted a confused, "What happened?" But significantly, no one asked me for my side of the story. They didn't need to. Victoria knew exactly how to play her audience. She wasn't trying to win me back anymore. That ship had sailed, and she was smart enough to recognize it. Now she was focused on damage control, making sure she didn't walk away from this divorce looking like the villain in her own story. She needed to salvage her reputation and maintain the support of our social circle. I scrolled through the messages and saw exactly what she wanted them all to believe: that I had checked out emotionally years ago, that I had become distant and unavailable, that she had tried everything to reconnect with me, and that I was the one who had given up on our marriage. In a way, she was right about some of it. I had tried everything. I'd cooked special dinners that she complained about. I'd suggested date nights that she was too busy for. I'd attempted conversations that she shut down with eye rolls and sighs. She had tried things too: lying, gaslighting, manipulation, disappearing for days at a time, reappearing with elaborate excuses, and rewriting our entire relationship history to justify her betrayal. But facts have gravity. They don't stay buried forever, no matter how much emotional manipulation you pile on top of them. That afternoon, I sent exactly one message to the group chat. No long explanation, no angry rant, no defensive justification of my actions. Just a simple forward of a screenshot that I'd quietly saved 3 weeks earlier. An image from Victoria's own iCloud account that she'd forgotten was synced to the home laptop I sometimes used for work. The photo showed her in a hotel bed, grinning at the camera, wearing someone else's shirt. On the nightstand next to the bed sat a silver BMW key fob. No caption, no commentary from me, just a fact presented without editorial. Then I left the group chat entirely and muted everything that followed. I didn't need to stick around to watch the aftermath or see how people reacted to the evidence. I didn't need to engage in debates about who was right or wrong, or listen to people try to justify what was clearly unjustifiable. Let them sort it out among themselves. Let them wonder about the details. Let the image speak for itself and do what words never could. Cut through all the emotional manipulation and reveal the simple, undeniable truth. The next day, my inbox was flooded with messages. Friends, co-workers, even Victoria's sister, who I'd always gotten along with, reached out with a mixture of reactions. Most were awkward and uncomfortable. A few were angry, and some were apologetic. But I didn't answer any of them. I didn't need to explain myself or justify my actions to anyone. The only message I bothered to open was from Tyler, and it was exactly what I needed to hear. You finally stood up for yourself. I'm proud of you. Don't ever go back. That night, I slept better than I had in years, and for the first time in months, I dreamed of nothing at all. The storm came exactly 4 days later, and this time Victoria didn't come alone. She showed up at my office again, but this time she brought reinforcements. Chloe was with her, the same woman who had been her personal cheerleader since college, the one who used to whisper and stir up drama at dinner parties, who had always called me overly serious behind my back and claimed I was too plain for Victoria's vibrant personality. I recognized the strategy immediately. Victoria wasn't coming to have a genuine conversation or attempt any kind of reconciliation. She was coming to put on a performance, and she needed an audience to make it effective. I was in the middle of a meeting when the receptionist buzzed my office. "There are 2 women here to see you," she said. "They're not on your calendar." I stepped into the hallway and saw them standing there like they were preparing for battle. Victoria wore a long trench coat with her arms crossed, and her jaw set in that determined expression she used when she was gearing up for a fight. Chloe was wearing oversized sunglasses indoors, like she was there to provide backup or bear witness to some kind of dramatic confrontation. They looked like they expected a scene, complete with cameras and witnesses. Instead, they got complete silence. I didn't say a single word. I just looked at them, waiting to see what kind of show they had planned. Victoria was the first one to crack under the pressure of my silence. "Dylan!" she snapped, like she was summoning a disobedient dog. "Can we talk privately?" Chloe stepped forward like a bodyguard, adding her own commentary. "He owes you a conversation, Victoria." I ignored Chloe completely, keeping my eyes focused solely on Victoria. Her tone shifted quickly when she realized I wasn't going to be intimidated by their little tag team approach. "I don't know what kind of narrative you're trying to build," she said, her voice rising now for the benefit of the people who were watching through the office windows. "But airing private photos in a public chat, that was disgusting. You embarrassed me." I smiled, just barely. "I didn't send that picture to embarrass you," I said calmly. "I sent it to stop you from lying." She flinched. It was a small reaction, but it was definitely there. "You think I'm the villain," she continued, her voice getting louder and more theatrical. "You think walking out without a word makes you noble? You abandoned me, Dylan. You cheated on me and gave up on us long before I did. There it was again, her tried and true fallback strategy. When you don't like the truth, dilute it with emotional noise and false equivalencies. Why are you really here, Victoria? I asked, keeping my voice as calm as ever. She hesitated for just a moment, and I saw Chloe nudge her encouragingly. I want to talk, she said finally. Like real talk about what comes next. I laughed softly. You mean the part where I take you back after months of lies, gaslighting, and manipulation? Or are you talking about the part where you spin this whole situation to your divorce lawyer so you don't lose your grip on my savings account? That comment hit its target perfectly. Her eyes turned cold, and she looked at me like I was a complete stranger. No more tears, no more sad, wounded expressions, just pure calculation. We don't have to burn the whole house down, she said quietly, her voice dropping to a more threatening tone. But if you keep pushing me, I will make this divorce as difficult as possible for you. I stepped forward just enough for her to hear me clearly. You already did make it difficult, I said. The difference is, now I'm pushing back. I turned around and walked back into my office, closing the door on whatever pathetic theater performance she had left in her repertoire. Behind the glass, I watched her fume while Chloe whispered something in her ear. Victoria nodded slowly, straightened her expensive coat, and walked out like she hadn't just been completely exposed in front of half my office building. It didn't feel triumphant or satisfying. It just felt like the end of something that had been dragging on far too long. Later that evening, I received a formal email from her attorney with the subject line, preliminary discussion on separation terms. That was the moment everything became completely real, not just emotionally, but legally, financially, and practically. 7 years of shared life, a house, joint bank accounts, retirement plans, insurance beneficiaries, everything was about to be unspooled like thread on a spindle that I'd never wanted to let go of in the first place. But I was ready. I'd already taken steps to protect myself financially. I'd frozen our joint accounts, closed the shared credit card, changed my will, updated all my passwords, and had new locks installed on my apartment. Victoria had been expecting me to be reactive, slow to respond, maybe even broken by the whole situation. She thought I'd be easy to manipulate in divorce proceedings, just like I'd been easy to manipulate in the marriage. She was wrong. I wasn't that man anymore. Tyler came over that night with a 6-pack of beer, and we sat on my small patio not saying much of anything, just listening to the wind as it slipped between the buildings like a ghost with nowhere left to haunt. You doing okay? He asked after we'd been sitting in comfortable silence for a while. I'm getting there, I replied honestly. Good, he said, taking a long drink from his beer. Because the way she looked at you today when I heard about it, she's not done trying to get under your skin, not by a long shot. I know, I said, and I meant it. But she can try all she wants. She'll never find her way back to who I used to be because that version of me doesn't exist anymore. What's broken can sometimes be glued back together, but what's completely shattered, that stays in pieces. She didn't take the hint. If anything, Victoria seemed to ramp up her efforts over the following days. First, it was more phone calls, more frequent, more desperate, but always teetering on that fine line between apology and manipulation. Then came the gifts. A package was delivered to my new apartment with no return address and no note inside. When I opened it, I found my old college hoodie, the one she used to steal from me back when we were happy, when she'd wear it around the house on lazy Sunday mornings. Tucked beneath it was the watch I thought she'd lost 3 years ago, the one my father had given me before he passed away. That particular gift got under my skin in a way the others hadn't. Not because I thought it meant she actually cared about me, but because I realized she knew exactly what she was doing. That watch had weight and history and emotional significance that went far beyond our relationship. She'd taken it, kept it hidden, held it back for years, and now with everything crumbling around her, she decided to return it like some kind of peace offering. She was trying to get into my head, to remind me of deeper connections and older loyalties that predated our problems. It was emotional manipulation of the most calculated kind. So I boxed everything back up, drove to her office building myself, and dropped the package on the front desk with a short note that read, I don't need reminders of who you pretended to be. 3 hours later, she called. I didn't answer. 12 minutes after that, she left a voicemail that I accidentally heard when I was trying to delete it. I don't know who you are anymore, Dylan, her voice said, sounding frantic and wounded. You used to be kind. You used to care about people. I made mistakes, yeah, but this is cruel. Cruel. She actually used that word. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to understand how someone could still have the audacity to play the victim after everything she'd done. After the lies, after Brandon, after trying to rewrite our entire relationship history like I was some forgettable chapter in her life story, she could still act like I was the one being unreasonable. That night, I got a message from Brandon. Yes, Brandon himself. He'd somehow found me on Instagram through a new profile. No profile picture, no bio, just a burner account he'd created specifically to reach out to me. The message was exactly what I'd expected from someone like him. "You don't know what really happened between us," it read. "She told me you were done years ago. She said you treated her like a ghost, like she didn't even exist. What did you expect her to do?" I stared at that message for a very long time, and I realized that I wasn't even angry anymore. Instead, I felt something closer to pity for him, because Brandon had no idea that he was next in line. He didn't understand that he wasn't the exception, the prize, or the better man who had rescued Victoria from her unhappy marriage. Victoria had a clear and consistent pattern that I could see now with perfect clarity. When she got bored with her current situation, she started flirting with the idea of escape. When things got complicated or required actual effort, she blamed someone else for the problems. When someone gave her everything they had to offer, she drained it completely dry and then turned that person into a villain for being tired and depleted. Brandon thought he was special, that he was different somehow. He wasn't. He was just the next person waiting in line to drown in her needs and demands. Victoria would do to him exactly what she'd done to me. Slowly chip away at his self-worth, lie to his face, manipulate him into thinking he was the problem, and then start looking for his replacement while he was still trying to figure out what he'd done wrong. I blocked him without replying. He didn't deserve a response, and frankly, he wouldn't have believed anything I told him anyway. He was still in the honeymoon phase where Victoria seemed perfect, and I seemed like the unreasonable ex-husband who couldn't handle losing her. That weekend, I met with my divorce lawyer to discuss strategy and terms. I didn't want drama or a prolonged court battle. I wanted distance and a clean break. My terms were straightforward and reasonable. We'd split the house proceeds 50-50. I'd take the car since it was primarily in my name, no alimony payments in either direction, and no drawn-out courtroom battles over who was more wronged. Just clean lines on paper to match the emotional freedom I'd already claimed for myself. But Victoria, of course, didn't want simple or reasonable. She wanted control, and she wanted to punish me for having the audacity to leave her before she was ready to discard me. 3 days later, I received an email from her attorney that pushed back on every single point I'd proposed. She wanted full ownership of the house, claiming she had more emotional memories tied to it than I did. She wanted the car because it had been purchased during our marriage with joint funds. And most ridiculously, she wanted financial compensation for the emotional hardship caused by abandonment. Abandonment. That word again. This was coming from the same woman who had left me alone in our house night after night while she played dress-up with someone else's future. The woman who had lied with a straight face and dared me to prove she was lying. The woman who came home smelling like cologne I didn't wear and claimed I was imagining things when I asked about it. No, what Victoria had experienced wasn't abandonment. It was a consequence. And it was long overdue. I called my lawyer immediately and told her we'd go to court if necessary. I wasn't bluffing, and I wasn't going to be intimidated by Victoria's legal threats. She wanted a war? She'd finally found someone who wouldn't fold under pressure. But here's the thing about people like Victoria. They don't handle rejection well at all. They thrive on control, attention, and the ability to manipulate outcomes in their favor. When the script stops working and people stop responding to their tactics, they tend to unravel completely. The unraveling started with another text message, this one containing a photo that was clearly designed to provoke a reaction. It showed Victoria and Brandon together on what looked like an expensive yacht, both of them grinning and holding champagne glasses. The caption read, "Some endings are blessings in disguise." The message wasn't meant to be a celebration of her new relationship. It was bait, pure and simple. She wanted to make me jealous, to prove that she was doing just fine without me, to show me what I was supposedly missing by walking away from her. But I didn't take the bait. I didn't respond with anger or jealousy or any kind of emotional reaction whatsoever. Let her put on whatever show she wanted to put on. Let her post photos and pretend her life was perfect. I wasn't watching her performance anymore. I was already building something else. Something better. Something honest. Something that didn't require lies or manipulation or constant drama to sustain itself. Because sometimes you don't have to win the argument or prove that you're right. Sometimes you just have to walk away from the fire and never look back. I didn't respond to the yacht photo. I didn't even open it again after that first quick glance. Let Victoria think whatever she wanted about my reaction, that I was bitter, wounded, jealous, or devastated by seeing her with someone else. I wasn't any of those things anymore. What I was, quite simply, was done with her entire existence. But Victoria wasn't done with me, not by a long shot. 4 days after her fake honeymoon photo with Brandon, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email or a text message, but an actual handwritten letter in the kind of dramatic, cursive handwriting she only used for Christmas cards and birthday notes when she wanted to appear deep and thoughtful. The paper smelled like the expensive perfume she used to wear on purpose whenever she was going out for one of her so-called yoga retreats. The envelope was lavender-colored and sealed with a gold sticker, like it was some kind of sacred document that deserved special presentation. I almost threw it in the trash without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside were 2 full pages of carefully crafted manipulation, and the very first line stopped me in my tracks. "You might not believe this, but I never wanted to hurt you." She always started her manipulations like that. Not with actual truth, but with framing. The rest of the letter was a masterfully layered mixture of selective memory, half-hearted regret, and emotional bait designed to drag me back into her web. She wrote extensively about the early days of our relationship, our first trip together to Chicago, when we danced in the rain and drank wine straight from the bottle in a paper bag. The time I held her all night after her mother's surgery, when she was scared and vulnerable. The little apartment with the crooked windows where we first said "I love you" to each other. She was trying to pull me back, memory by memory, to a time when things between us had been genuine and beautiful. Then came the subtle switch that I'd learned to recognize from years of living with her. "I just didn't feel seen anymore," she wrote. "I was drowning in our marriage, and I needed someone to remind me that I was still worth something. Brandon didn't steal me away from you, Dylan. You lost me by checking out emotionally long before I ever looked elsewhere." There it was, every single line a carefully constructed deflection, a justification wrapped in flowery language and false vulnerability. She wasn't taking responsibility for her betrayal. She was reframing it as a natural consequence of my supposed emotional absence. As if the cure for loneliness in a marriage was deception and infidelity. As if cheating was just a symptom that I had given her, rather than a choice she had made. The final paragraph was the one she'd crafted most carefully. The one she probably thought would hit me where it hurt the most. "If we can't be what we were to each other, maybe we can at least find some peace in how we end this. I'd rather be your past with grace than your regret with bitterness." I read that sentence 3 times, then folded the letter once very neatly and fed it into my paper shredder. I watched the teeth eat her words 1 slow inch at a time until there was nothing left but confetti. She wanted grace? Fine. Grace was me walking away quietly instead of destroying her reputation. Grace was me not dragging her name through the mud, even when I had every right to do so. Grace was me giving her the space to run her mouth, spin her stories, and flash her fake smiles while I chose silence instead of retaliation. But grace doesn't mean reconciliation, and it sure as hell doesn't mean forgetting what someone did to you. Later that same night, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was Chloe, and she sounded like she hadn't slept in days. "Dylan," she said, her voice shaky and uncertain. "I shouldn't be calling you, but I thought you should know something. Brandon's gone." I sat up straighter. "Gone? They broke up," she continued. "Or well, he found out she was messaging someone else behind his back. I don't know all the details because Victoria won't tell me everything, but she's been spiraling. She's been drinking way too much, texting random people at 3 in the morning, calling in sick to work. She's really not in a good place right now." I let the silence stretch between us, not sure how I was supposed to respond to this information. "She keeps saying she made a terrible mistake," Chloe went on, her voice getting quieter. "That she chose chaos over comfort, whatever that means." I still didn't say anything. There was nothing for me to say. "Anyway," Chloe said finally, "I guess I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry, for a lot of things." That part did surprise me. "You helped her lie to me for months," I said flatly. "I did," she admitted without trying to make excuses. "I thought she was unhappy in your marriage. I thought you were emotionally cold and distant. I didn't see the full picture of what was really happening." "You still don't see the full picture," I replied. She sighed deeply. Fair enough. We hung up after that, and I stared at the ceiling for a long time that night. Not thinking about Victoria, or even about Brandon, but about myself. About who I had been before I got so small, trying to fit into her version of what our life should look like. Because the truth was, I had spent so many years trying to be enough for someone who would never be satisfied that I'd forgotten how to be whole on my own. And now, in the silence she'd left behind, I was finally starting to remember who I used to be before I met her. The last time I saw Victoria was completely by accident. 3 weeks had passed since her manipulative letter. 4 weeks since her dramatic meltdown with Brandon. I hadn't heard from her directly during that entire time. Just the occasional social media ripple, distant echoes from mutual friends I no longer spoke to regularly. Oddly enough, even Chloe had gone completely silent, which made me wonder if she'd finally stopped orbiting Victoria's increasingly unstable world, or if she'd simply been pulled under by the chaos. I was at a bookstore of all places on a rainy Sunday afternoon. I remember thinking how rare it was for me to be doing something so simple and peaceful, just browsing through books without any agenda or timeline. I was standing in the self-help section, flipping through a book about rebuilding your life after emotional trauma. Not because I desperately needed the guidance anymore, but because it felt like confirmation of how far I'd already traveled in my healing process. It was the kind of book you read and think, I'm actually past this stage now. That's when I heard her voice behind me, soft and awkward. Dylan. I didn't freeze up or panic. I didn't feel my heart rate spike or my palms get sweaty. I simply turned around calmly, and there she was. Her hair was down and damp at the ends from the rain outside. She wasn't wearing any makeup, just jeans and an old hoodie that had seen better days. She looked small and ordinary, not broken or tragic, just completely unremarkable. Victoria had always tried so hard to appear untouchable and radiant, always performing some version of perfection for whoever might be watching. But now, stripped of all the performance and posturing, she looked like any other woman wandering through a bookstore on a rainy afternoon, trying to figure out a chapter of her life that she hadn't written carefully enough. "Hey," she said, like we were two casual acquaintances who hadn't spoken since college. I gave her a simple nod. "Hey!" We stood there surrounded by bookshelves in a strange bubble of quiet, with the soft murmur of rain against the windows and other customers shuffling around us, completely unaware of the weight of this accidental encounter. "You look good," she said finally. "I am good," I replied simply. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, and I saw that familiar flicker in her eyes. She'd been hoping for more from me. Some crack in my composure, a question about how she was doing, some opening that would let her back into my emotional space. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, "about us, about everything that happened." I stayed quiet, giving her nothing to work with. "I know I messed up," she continued, her voice getting softer. I don't think I knew what I really wanted until it was gone." There it was. Not genuine regret or a real apology, just loss. She wasn't sorry for what she had done to me or how she had treated our marriage. She was sorry for where her choices had left her. Sorry that her grass is greener mentality had backfired on her. "I thought Brandon would feel like freedom," she said, almost like she was talking to herself. But he wasn't freedom. He was just new and empty. I didn't respond, not out of spite or cruelty, but because nothing she could say mattered anymore. The words had no power to hurt me, but they also had no power to heal anything or change the fundamental reality of our situation. "I still love you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "You know that, right?" That statement didn't even sting. I looked at her and saw exactly what she was. Not the woman I had married, not the woman I had mourned losing, but the person who had taught me exactly how far I could fall if I kept trying to love someone who didn't value honesty or respect. "I hope you figure things out, Victoria," I said calmly, "but I'm not part of that story anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment she looked like she might break down completely. "So that's really it? After everything we've been through together?" "That was it a long time ago," I said without any hesitation or doubt. She nodded slowly, then looked down at the floor between us as if she thought there might be one last magic word waiting there. One final thing she could say that would change everything back to the way it used to be. There wasn't. She left the bookstore without saying another word. I stayed there for a while longer, eventually buying the book I'd been reading. When I got home that evening, I opened a fresh journal and started writing. Not about her, not about our failed marriage, not about the betrayal or the lies or the pain. I wrote about myself. About what comes next in my life. About rebuilding from a fire that I didn't start, but had damn sure finished. Because here's what I know now, what I learned from the ashes of that relationship. Love without honesty is nothing more than a performance. Loyalty without respect is just servitude. And staying somewhere you're not valued isn't noble or romantic. It's self-destruction in slow motion. I don't hate Victoria. I don't wish her pain or suffering or loneliness. But I do wish her distance from me, from my life, from the peace I finally earned through all of this. And to anyone who might be reading this and recognizing their own situation, if you see the signs, don't wait around trying to find absolute proof. Don't wait for your self-worth to erode so completely that lies feel more comfortable than truth. Trust your instincts. Move when the moment calls you to move. And remember that leaving isn't weakness, it's freedom. And I am finally truly free.